This is Tim Mordar with The Beat, chatting with Big Nate creator Lincoln Peirce, producer Mitch Watson, and the voice of Big Nate himself, Ben Giroux. How are you guys doing?
Very good. How are you?
So I know from recent social media posts that you guys made history in that you had the first six-person recording ensemble since before the pandemic. How was that like to get everyone back together in the booth?
It was great. It was great. I mean, what's been wonderful is to finally get back in the booth because we did a 14-person record over Zoom, which was kind of insane early on. But this was the first time, we'd ever been able to get the core cast and everybody in. So there's just an alchemy that happens when everybody's in the same room together that's just fantastic.
Yeah, and I would say, it was obviously COVID presented some interesting challenges for us when we began recording our show in the middle of the pandemic. So we were remote for almost 3 years, recording from our home booths as actors. So now, only recently, getting back in the studio all together in person, we record our show as an ensemble. There's a lot of improvisation on our show. We're able to riff with each other. That obviously was much more difficult over Zoom. So now that we get to do it in the studio, it's just a blast.
Lincoln, as I discussed with Mitch last year during a press junket, really interesting to see the adaptation process. Some things change, some things stay the same. I'm curious, what has been like seeing the changes, particularly with this new season, like with Nate's grandparents?
It's been great. I mean, I think that some of the limitations of the comic strip format and the book format that I've been working in, we sort of are able to just blow those away in animation and tell the sorts of stories that really you could never tell in a comic strip. So that's been super fun. And then, seeing these characters moving around, speaking, when for many, many years I've really only seen them on a flat page, and I really don't hear their voices inside my head when I draw them. So for me, seeing some of these characters, like Nate's grandparents, or some new characters we created, like this character Amy, it has been fantastic to sort of see them, come to life.
So there's been some great guest stars, both in the last season and this current season. Two of my favorites have to be J.B. Blanc and Matthew Lillard. It's funny enough, Mitch, you worked with both of them, Matthew, both on, J.B. Blanc on Beware the Batman, and Matthew Lillard both on Scooby-Doo and Beware the Batman. I'm curious if that was your inspired casting choices?
It was. It was, yeah, no, both of them Matt and I have been friends ever since Scooby-Doo, and I met JB when we were doing Batman, and JB and I became very good friends, and so when we conceived of the idea of Moose and Fish, which was germinated from an idea from Sam Koji Hale, who's our art director, immediately I just thought, perfect, because JB's got a fantastic deep voice and everything like that, and Matt is really good at playing highly emotional characters, which was how the two characters were written, and so I couldn't have been happier. I also like, if I can, to work with people I've worked with in the past, especially people that I'm friendly with, because it just makes it a much more fun and warm and inviting environment. And both those guys are just my favorites.
So it's funny, recently the new upcoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, they were intentional in casting actual teenagers. For Big Nate, I know it wasn't really discussed bringing in actual kids, I believe.
Wait a minute, I'm not a kid!
Kid at heart. Kid at heart. Again, I think because from what I remember, you said as great as those talented kids may be, they don't have the improvisational skills that you need. I'm curious, the casting decision and actually getting adults for playing kids' characters.
Exactly right. I mean, that's exactly, yeah, that was, you remember the question from before. Yeah, that's exactly the reason why. I've worked with kids before. I enjoy working with kids, but when you're dealing with a show like this one, where there's a lot of interaction comedically with the different characters, you just have to, I need people who have more life experience, quite honestly, to be able to pull off some of the humor and the jokes and the subtlety. And fortunately, we just got a fantastic group of people, with Ben and Arnie and Bryce and Daniel and everybody. And then also too, Ali Stroker, who came in then as Amy. She's just been amazing. And everybody we've been able to get is fantastic. But I just don't think you can, there's many people who disagree with me, but I don't think you can get that level of emotion and comedy and improv with kids. I just don't think you can.
Yeah, I would not have signed off on a show if we cast actual kids. And I think there's also a practical consideration when you think about, say we cast an actor as Nate, who was 11 years old. Then we go into season 2,
Yep.
and the kid's 12. What if his voice changes? It's just there are practical considerations that you need to think of. So this way, we get all the cash and prizes that Mitch just told you about in terms of what our actors can bring to the table. And we know that they're going to sound the same. If this show's on the air for 10 years, they're going to sound the same in 10 years as they do now.
Ben, I think most people are aware that you've been in a number of Nickelodeon projects before Big Nate. I have a feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nickelodeon seems to be like a second home, almost like your Cheers, where everyone knows your name. Am I correct in assuming so?
100%. I've been so grateful to be a part of this network for so long. Obviously, Big Nate is a dream role. I grew up drawing and doodling, so the fact that Nate is a character who sort of creates his own awesomeness by drawing and doodling feels, just very full circle for my life. But yeah, I'm a Nick kid. I grew up watching Doug and Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy, and so to be voicing a 2023 version of what it means to be a Nickelodeon kid is it's really a dream come true.
Guys, on the subject of drawing, you mentioned Sam Koji Hale. I know there's a lot of Terry Gilliam influence with the artwork. It's funny, I was reading his memoir, and he mentioned how in his films and his art, he likes to fill the frame as much as possible, so you reward viewers who kind of go back and for multiple viewings. There's a lot of stuff. The art is fantastic, and especially I think it rewards multiple viewings. Probably the biggest one, or my favorite, is having Brad Gunther in the background of certain things. Yeah. I'm curious your approach to the art and having basically rewarding people who rewatch the series.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you haven't even noticed yet, and that it's going to pay off. There's some things that I can't talk about that will pay off. I can tell you some of it revolves around the tentacles that appear periodically on the show. That will be paying. You're going to find out why that is in a way that you probably wouldn't expect. But there's a lot of stuff like that. We like to hide things in the frame. Brad Gunter's a perfect example of us doing that. If you watch any of the shows, though, that's one of the fun things about this particular show is it's super collaborative. I mean, all the way down to the people who are doing the props and the backgrounds and everything like that. Everybody is participating in one way or another. So even if you were to freeze frame and go in on the props, there's particular things on the props which are little Easter eggs. There's the whole corporation that we created, the U Corporation, which sort of came out collaboratively of like we needed to have sort of this bogus corporation, and now they've become more of a part of the show and stuff like that. So if you go back anywhere within any episode, you can probably find stuff that we've hidden here and there.
So Lincoln, I know in a previous press junket with Mitch, I kind of mentioned probably a good example of comic strips being adapted for animation, the Boondocks. Obviously, that's more adult, but it's interesting to see how they approached adapting it for animation and changes they made, adding new characters. I'm curious, and how it even influenced the comic strip. Curious if the series has at all influenced your approach to comic strip?
I would say not really, because I think as I mentioned before, there are some inherent limitations in the comic strip, and you kind of have to be careful in a daily comic strip that you don't overwhelm your feature with too many characters and too much going on, because you just can't fit it in. And you just can't sustain a daily comic strip where you've only got 4 panels. It can only sustain so many characters. And so, there are some great characters that we are inventing specifically for the show. and I think they exist perfectly in the show and are going to work great for the show, but I don't think that necessarily means that I would bring them into the comic strip.
So Ben, I know before the show, Arnie, you actually he's your writing partner who plays Nate's best friend Teddy. I'm curious, if that relationship kind of seeps into the performance, and if you've grown closer with any of the other classmates.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I actually had the luxury of knowing all of our core cast before we started recording the show, and I think that really helped really create some camaraderie and chemistry in the wider cast earlier on than it would otherwise develop when you're recording a show remote over Zoom. So as you said, Arnie Pantoja is my writing partner, he's my improv partner. We're able to absolutely infuse that improvisation into the show, courtesy of a showrunner who lets us go off the rails with improv once in a while. And then Bryce Charles, who plays Dee Dee on the show, her and I had just done a play at the Laguna Playhouse prior to starting Big Nate, so we had a camaraderie we had already built. And then Daniel M.K. Cohen and I, a fellow short guy, we had both known each other from auditioning as Christmas elves in various commercials over the years. So we really bonded over that trauma. And so yeah, we're friends in real life. You know, we like to say when the cast hangs out, it's sort of like real life PS38. And certainly those real life bonds absolutely find their way onto the show.
Thanks to our sponsors, Mad Cave and Global Comics.